Why did you stop training? Were you sick, injured, or lazy? Whatever the reason may be, it doesn't matter because there is tremendous hope for all of you. You will regain your strength and size in a short amount of time because muscle memory is a real thing. And what you have to know is that right now, you are extremely sensitive to training. In other words, you don't have to train as hard for everything to come back. So now it's time to stop beating yourself down because I'll be giving you some strategies for training after a layoff. The first being using your minimum effective volume. See, many lifters will be extremely motivated for whatever reason. Maybe it's New Year's and they think to themselves, I got this drive, let me maximize it by going all out, running the most brutal program of all time. Hey, let's do small off junior, instant, flooding, let's freaking go. And some guys do experience success with it, but I'm gonna say the majority probably don't because the recovery implications are absolutely insane. You will be sore for weeks and might even increase the chance of getting injured for no reason. At the same time, why not milk the fact that you can get a high training stimulus without doing as much work? So if you're doing 14 sets a week for a given muscle, maybe cut that in half, which can include 3 sets of 2 compound movements and then 1 set of an isolation if you really want to be basic like that. It honestly doesn't take much for the body to start adapting once more. And so you should be incrementally increasing your volume as the weeks pass by, not just jumping into the highest amount right off the bat. Hey, even with novice programs where the volume is automatically not that high, you can still cut it back a little bit. So if every exercise calls for 5 sets, just drop it down to 3. It really is as simple as that. And in some cases, you might be able to get away with 2 sets per compound movement. So all I'm trying to say is use the absolute lowest volume that still allows you to recover. Because another thing too is that your current work capacity isn't that great. So it's going to take a few workouts to get that groove back. Then eventually you're just flying through the sessions. You're like, okay, this is obviously way too little volume. And that's when you gain the confidence to take things up a notch. Secondly, I don't recommend going to failure on every single set. In fact, you should probably avoid it for now. It doesn't have to be 3 to 4 reps in reserve. Just leave a rep or 2 and you'll be perfectly fine. Thing is, if we're basing this off our 1 rep max, which isn't actually going to be your peaked 1 rep max, it's not the true representation of what you're currently able to do since you took a long deload per se, the volume rep work will be super easy to manage from a recovery standpoint. So let me throw that aspect in as well. Although I said not to go all out right off the bat, I still think it's a very valid option to begin a training cycle with a 1 rep max. You're a lot weaker, and what will happen 9 out of 10 times, if not 100% of the time, if you were to reattempt that same 1 rep max 2 weeks later, you would have upped the number substantially. So that's why I would not consider this overload training or even ego lifting, because if anything, it forces you to take your time with the stuff that comes after. And you'll just find the weights naturally getting easier over time. So let's say day 1, you hit a 320 pound barbell back squat. Base 70% off that number. And now you're down to 2 plates for sets of 10. And what you'll find is that in a few weeks, you can probably knock out 350 for 1 rep max. And I'm not over exaggerating when I say this. Therefore, the 225 rep work isn't going to beat you down. And that's where you can slowly start to add those weights. And what I'm also going to say to this is ramping sets are a great choice. I personally recommend adding 5 pounds per set. So you're not doing anything crazy over here. This could be as simple as doing 215 on the bench for 5 reps, set 2, 220 for 5, set 3, 225 for 5. And in most cases, you'll be able to do this when you just start training again. It's only after a few weeks that it's like, oh, those 5 pound jumps don't quite work anymore. And when that happens, guess what? You don't do the ramping sets anymore. The first set is going to be the same weight for all 3 sets, if that makes sense. So all we're trying to do is just ease into things. Now, regarding exercise selection, I should mention that you don't need to make this complicated at all. In fact, if you're running a maximized program for a long time, or you regress to being a novice lifter again from intermediate, just roll with it. Keep it as simple as possible. You don't have to rotate the variations every single week. Maybe doing some longer blocks is to your benefit right now because you can get away with it. And overuse is likely not to occur because of all the factors I previously discussed. So I wouldn't stress whatsoever about getting snapped up. My only concern would be if you're maxing out every week. In that case, you do have to rotate. But even then, the way you change them up doesn't have to be too extreme. Like, you don't have to do the hardest variations like benching with 90 pounds of chains. So in this situation, ultra-specific training is actually a good thing. And that's why some people will run a program like 531 when going back into things, because it sets the tone. You start off with your 1 rep max or an estimation off that, usually it's 90% of that number, and then you go through the waves. Fives, triples, and singles, you take the deload. Usually after 1 or 3 of those cycles, you're ready to go full on into whatever program you decide to do. And the strength gains tend to peak relatively quickly. So that's a basic example, but another could be just doing the regular compound movements for higher reps. So instead of doing SSB good mornings, belt squats, jam presses, basically the accessories that we know are incredibly effective, you probably don't have to do that right now. Just do a 3 sets of 10 classic ball back squat, and then RDL 3x10 for your posterior chain. And then for triceps, the classic push down, or just doing skull crushers with dumbbells. You don't have to overcomplicate the exercise variety. The more noobish it is, the better off you're probably going to be. And this prevents paralysis by analysis from happening in the first place, which is very common when coming back from a layoff. So it's all about the psychology in treating your body like a respected temple. You're not just abusing it with everything that you can fucking throw at it. In this respect, much of what I said today is simple common sense, but you'd be surprised how many people don't apply this. Besides that, I really mean it when I say you'll regain a lot of muscle and strength quickly, to the point where this is usually reflected in your appetite. You start training hard again, you're freaking hungry, and you start piling on that food. And next thing you know, you probably gained over 10 pounds in a single month, much of which is not even fat, because you're so detrained. And I have a friend who took close to a year off from lifting completely. And after 3 months, he was back to benching 3 plates. Hey, if you got shredded recently and weren't able to perform optimally, give yourself a month and your strength might increase at a rate you didn't think was possible. And in general, if you were weak and depleted, when you start training properly again, it's almost like going through the novice phase once more. It's very temporary, but quick. And that's what's so beautiful about all this. You may be floating in your clothes right now, or perhaps whenever you grab a heavy barbell, it's heavy in your hands. You put on your back, wow, I could feel the weight. But not for long, my friend. That I can promise you. So get in the trenches, keep your head up high. Don't ego lift. Be smart now, because all you have to do is trust this simple process. Do that, and you'll be shocked that, hey, I'm fucking killing it again. All right? So don't be discouraged. Enjoy the gains, and I'll talk to you soon.